Hello, friends, and welcome back to UFC Picks and Predictions. It's been a while since we've last seen each other. Been a little bit of inactivity on the channel for a little bit, but do not fret. I've been diligently working on not only the 50 subscriber special, which is basically like a meme at this point, but also another series that is unrelated to MMA. There is going to be a sneak peek for that new series. That's something that I'm going to put out probably before the 50 subscriber special even. And that sneak peek will be at the end of this video, so stay tuned for that if that interests you. We're about to get right into it. UFC Fight Night. I don't know if it's AKA really UFC Paris because it's not a pay-per-view. It's just a fight night. It is taking place in Paris, France. Paris. Very excited as this card actually seems pretty stacked, I'm not going to lie. I think there's going to be decent fights. Maybe not as many finishes as one would initially think, but I do think that there are going to be a decent amount. There's going to be good fights. Good fights. Without further ado, let's start off with the early prelims and work our way up to the main event. The early prelim opener of Bolaji versus Chris Duncan. I think this fight actually should be pretty good. This is a good test for both guys in a sense. Like Chris Duncan, even though he has a longer and more successful UFC run at 2 wins and 1 loss in the UFC, filling out his entire professional record of 11-2, Chris Duncan has fallen short and looked slow, looked a little chinny, looked a bit suspect. But he is not bad by any means, actually. Might even be more verified, more validated than Bolaji because Bolaji, if you'll remember, was actually coming into the UFC as a prospect with decent hype, a decent hype surrounding him. He was supposed to fight, I think his original debut fight was rescheduled, or rather his opponent rescheduled, and he had to fight Timmy Cuamba on short notice, and he won a split decision, but it was not easy. In fact, if anything, that made him lose a little bit of stock, the fact that he had so much trouble with Timmy Cuamba. I'm kind of relying on the youth, the physicality, the less taxed body and career of Bolaji to get him done with this one, because I do think that Chris Duncan actually has a decent chance of coming out on top as an underdog here, but I am going to go with Bolaji. I'm going to say by decision. I think actually if anyone gets a finish, surprisingly enough, it's going to be Chris Duncan. Possibly by submission, maybe even by KO TKO, but I do think that if someone were to get the finish here and it's not just like a fucking explosive one-shot knockout from Bolaji, it's probably going to be Chris Duncan actually working something to the finish. Bolaji does have decent enough technique, though. He is the pick, even though I'm kind of shitting on him a little bit. This is just a tentative pick. It's not as cut and dry as it may seem. And that's kind of a theme with this card. A lot of these fights seem cut and dry, like the pick is it's simple, it's right there. But if you dive a little bit more into it, there's some layers here. Not the full onion card, but there are layers here. As always, it's actually pretty egregious, I think, in France. They really want to build up French fighters, so they'll give them kind of layup fights. But in this card specifically, not all of these fights are layups, for real. Some of them, they actually got kind of done dirty, and we're about to pull up on that right now. Bolaji is the pick. Moving on to the second prelim of Nora Cornolle versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti, as I say, Cavalcanti. Some people say Cavalcanti. I've heard announcers say Cavalcanti when she was on the regional scene. I like Cavalcanti. She's Portuguese. It would make sense. I digress. Jacqueline is the pick. She is the fucking pick. I really like Cavalcanti. First off, Cornolle and Cavalcanti have already met before, actually. They met basically when they were both starting off in their careers, I'm pretty sure. Something like that. And Jacqueline won, I think. I might be misremembering that, but I'm pretty sure that happened. Cavalcanti faced Nora Cornolle in her second fight of her MMA career, and she won a decision in FFA Challenge 2 back in 2021. Now, both women have had success. The only thing is there's literally a 7-year difference between the two. When that fight took place, Cavalcanti was 24. Nora was already 31. Nora's 34 now, and Jacqueline is 27. Still got a lot of time left. And 34 is not, like, crazy old by any means, but that's when things start to change, I'd say. That is when things would start to change. And I'm actually pretty big just on Jacqueline Cavalcanti in general. I picked her to beat Josiane Nunes, actually by KO TKO in round 3, because I really like the constant pressure and constant striking that Cavalcanti is able to offer. I think that she's going to be a better striker than Cornolle, even though she might get pressured a tiny bit, similar to how she was getting pressured by Josiane Nunes at times, but it won't really matter. I don't think it's going to actually matter here. She's going to have a little bit of a size advantage. Cavalcanti's kind of a big girl with a long reach, low-key, as well. And again, I could go crazy and say Jacqueline Cavalcanti by round 3 KO TKO, but actually, you know what? I am. We'll save that for later, but Cavalcanti's the pick here. I'm somewhat confident in it, and I think that... is she an underdog? I don't know who the dog is here. Oh, Jacqueline is actually the favorite. Okay. That's interesting to me. Nora, I picked her in her last fight, I think, actually. I might not have, versus Melissa Mullins/Dixon. Whatever her name is. I might have actually picked Melissa Dixon, but either way, I digress. That fight was kind of strange, because one, Melissa looked like dog shit, so even though Nora got the finish, it's like, that was just weird. Like, it was weird. A finish is not, like, finishes are finishes, but not all finishes are the same. That's enough on that one. Moving on to a fight that I'm actually very hyped for. I think this is actually one of the hardest fights to pick on the card, and this is going to be maybe one of the sleeper, crazy, possibly a fight of the night contender. I'm not going to lie. That fight being the men's flyweight bout of Daniel Barez. Danny Barez versus Victor Altamirano. Both of these dudes have almost a similar style. Very active, very aggressive. I think that Daniel is actually, funnily enough, the better fighter here. I think that Daniel has a lot more of a well-rounded game, and even in specific aspects like boxing and grappling, I think Daniel has the edge. I love the combinations, the boxing combinations from Daniel Barez to the head, to the body, in the pocket, hooks, uppercuts, all of that stuff, different angles. Now, I say all that. Daniel Barez's striking defense is sometimes suspect. It's just he keeps his hands down. Sometimes he watches and he's very open to counters. But if you're watching him, if you're watching Daniel Barez, he's going to take off on you. He's going to land hellacious combos. He's going to work you. Victor Altamirano might not get caught up in that fashion. However, I just think Daniel Barez definitely has all the tools to get this one done. Like, not only is the boxing nice, but he's a very competent grappler with exceptionally good timing on takedown attempts. Very good timing on the takedown attempts. Daniel does fade occasionally and later on because he does have a very high output in terms of both grappling and striking. I think he's an accurate striker too, good timing, a very good fighter, honestly. This is a sleeper fight, I think. Victor Altamirano is actually pretty decent himself. He's pretty decent himself. Both of these dudes have gone... some tough breaks in their careers with decisions that could have went their way or are basically arguably robberies. I think that Daniel Barez low-key actually won his Contender Series fight versus Carlos Hernandez. I rewatched that very recently, right before filming this, just to solidify the Daniel Barez pick. Victor Altamirano, a lot of people say he got robbed versus Felipe Dos Santos. So, I think that this is a good showing. I don't know if anyone's going to get finished here because both guys are very tough. So I'm going to go with Daniel Barez by decision, very calmly. Moving on. But I'm very excited for that fight. That fight is low-key spooky hours. Not for the same way that many people would think, but it's low-key spooky hours. Moving on. Ailin Pérez versus Darya Zheleznyakova. I want to pick Darya so fucking bad because I think that she's going to be the better striker. The thing is, Ailin Pérez, the better fighter. Again, overall, the better fighter. Competent enough in striking, with some power as well behind it, and a competent enough wrestler. Like, some people actually have been shitting on her for her wrestling. It's just, like, mainly offensive based. She's just kind of throwing shit at the wall and waiting to see if it sticks, which I can see. But it works. She's getting better. She works it. And unfortunately with Darya, and this is kind of a little bit of a trend in all of Ailin Pérez's fights, the UFC has been giving Pérez some fighters that wrestling isn't their strongest attribute. And it gives Pérez a win condition, essentially. If you can keep taking her down, keep holding your opponent down, you'll win by decision. Ailin Pérez has pretty much done that. She has disappointed me. I forget who it was that Ailin Pérez disappointed me with. It might have been Tracy Cortez. She might have fought Tracy Cortez. Not going to even look it up. But either way, I do think that she's going to get this one done. She has to kind of be the pick for me here. But Darya is not... Darya can't be counted out. It's just if this fight goes to the ground, it's probably... You're going to see how the fight will play out. Like, you're going to see how it looks out. Also, the loss to Melissa Dixon, bad look for Darya. Very bad look. Moving on. Taylor Lapilus, as I call him. Taylor Lapilus versus Vince Morales. Again, I feel like you kind of have to go with Taylor Lapilus, even though I'm not exactly preying on that dude's downfall. It's just the fact that he's a decision merchant, not the most entertaining fighter, despite him being extremely skilled and technical. A very technical striker, a very skilled defensive wrestler. He knows how to win fights in his fashion. He's very good at it too. With a record of 20-4, 5 of those wins and 2 of those losses taking place in the UFC against some decent opponents as well as of late. Vince, on the other hand, is on his second UFC run, and he's not exactly dog shit. He's just struggled. He's struggled, you know? Not everyone can find success, especially in fighting, but Vince Morales, especially in between his time since his last UFC run and right now, this fight coming up, he's actually done very well, picked up some rare finishes, rare submissions outside of the UFC on a 4-fight win streak, I believe. There are some interesting facts about him. For example, Vince has been TKO'd via leg kick twice in his career. Out of 7 of his professional losses, 5 of them have taken place in the UFC. 2 of those were by leg kick. Just something to note. He could win this fight. He could catch Taylor Lapilus. If he decides to go all out, maybe he catches him with some real aggressive finish, like backs him up against the cage, lands something on the chin, and then maybe works that into a submission. That's kind of how I would picture it. But who knows? I am going with Taylor Lapilus here, though. I think that's the logical pick. Moving on to another fight that's pretty interesting, not as much spooky, but interesting. It's just an interesting matchup. Ludovic Klein versus Roosevelt Roberts. This is... Now, Roosevelt Roberts is not... Again, not one of these guys that's straight dog shit, but he's not, like, amazing in particular. He's on his second UFC run. He's found some success in the UFC and outside of it. Obviously, wasn't exactly UFC caliber, wasn't exactly cutting it. He does have some wins, but also some losses to people that are very questionable. And I think that there's levels between Ludovic Klein and Roosevelt Roberts. Granted, it's a fight, it's a fist fight. Anyone could win at any time, but aside from all of that schlock, I think Ludovic has this one in the bag. I think it's relatively simple as well. There is going to be a notable size difference between these two fighters, as Roosevelt is coming into this fight with a 73-inch reach and stands 6 feet 2 inches tall, as opposed to Ludovic Klein, who has a 72.5-inch reach and stands at a decent, noble 5'7". Ludovic's the pick here. We move on to Oumar Sy versus Dawoon Jung. Now, this fight is, again, it's almost a sacrifice. I think that Dawoon Jung is talented enough that this fight, any fight that involves him can't particularly be a sacrifice, as he can end a fight at almost any moment. He's just been on an unbearably bad skid. He has the unholy trinity. He's, in his last 3 fights, in order from oldest to most recent, he got hit with the unholy trinity. He was knocked out, lost to a decision, and most recently got tapped out. So it's really fucking rough, and not to the best dudes. The most recent loss to Carlos Ulberg, the rear naked choke, that's it. Carlos Ulberg he's tearing through right now. He's on a crazy run, but to lose to him by rear naked choke is just like, to get out wrestled and then lose a decision to Devin Clark is like, it's just like, what the fuck is happening here, man? Maybe there's always a chance that this happens with guys like Dawoon Jung, where they know, they're like, yo, if I lose this fight, even if it's a fucking close-ass decision, I'm probably going to be out of a job. So Dawoon Jung might come out looking like a completely different fighter, someone that we haven't seen in a long time. However, we have to come back to reality here. They want Oumar Sy to win. The French fighter in Paris, they want him to win. There's a reason why this was made up. The UFC doesn't fix fights in the typical sense that you might think of when you hear that term, that phrase, fixing fights or rigged fights. This is how the UFC rigs fights, though. They have the most favorable matchup that you could possibly have. This is one of those times. But hey, it might be a crazy fight. Oumar Sy coming into this fight 10-0. with one of those wins coming in the UFC. Huge dudes as well, both men 6'4", but Oumar Sy with a 4.5-inch reach advantage. Yeah, 4.5-inch reach advantage. Spooky hours. Oumar Sy is going to be the pick there. Moving on to Ion Cutelaba versus Ivan Erslan. I'm actually not too familiar with Ivan Erslan, but I think that this fight ultimately comes down to kind of a coin flip for real. Like, both dudes are kind of wild from what I understand. I know Ion is. We all know he is. Ivan, on the other hand, like, I know it's kind of crazy, but, like, he has a good record coming in. But, like, again, making your UFC debut, 32 years old, 14-3. Like, what's going on here? A little bit. It's just a little bit of what's going on here. Not the most. I also kind of just have a gut feeling, a straight hunch that I'm fully diving in on. Ion's going to find the chin. I think this is going to be a big knockout for Ion Cutelaba. Hopefully not him getting knocked out in devastating fashion. Really, that's it. Not too many details to dive into with that one, in my opinion. We move on to Fares Ziam versus Matt Frivola. Matt the Steamroller Frivola. Some people think that this fight has a lot more layers to it. I really don't. Again, I think that Matt Frivola has spooky power. This is a favorable matchup for Matt Frivola, in my opinion. I think he's going to get the KO TKO. When it happens, I don't exactly know. I think this is also a crazy fight. I think Fares Ziam, his last fight was fucking Claudio Puelles. A dude who I hate to call my Peruvian brother, the fucking self-proclaimed Prince of Peru. The guy is a fucking can opener. Like, not even a can. He's actually a can. He's like a talented can. It's an oxymoron, a non sequitur. Have you ever heard of that before? A talented can? It's Claudio fucking Puelles. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. I just want to see really quick if that was indeed Fares Ziam's last fight, because if that was, I actually think that's bad. In the sense of it's going to be, it was too. And that was a split decision. They tried to rob for us. He won literally because he threw like fucking 4 strikes around because Claudio wasn't doing shit. But anyways, I digress. What I wanted to say was I think that this fight is going to be such a tone shift, such a atmosphere change from his last outing. Like, the energy is going to be completely different. You're not fighting Claudio Puelles here, brother. You're fighting Matt Frivola. I think that speaks for itself. We move on. There is something to be noted, though. Notable age and height difference between these two fighters. Fares Ziam, the much younger fighter at 27 years old, 7 years younger than Matt Frivola, standing 4 inches taller at 6'1", with a 4-inch reach advantage as well at 75 inches. We move on, though. We move on to Morgan Sharia. I don't speak French, so that might have sounded crazy. Versus Gabriel Miranda. Gabriel Miranda, again, one of these dudes that I'm not familiar with. However, he actually seems like he might have something. I think Morgan Sharia is almost a lock. You know, he's extremely talented, has a very deceptive record. He's turned it up since he got into the UFC. He's been hanging in there with higher level dudes such as Chepe Mariscal, even though some people think that was a robbery. Not really going to talk about that much. My point being, Morgan is in a different stage of his career. He's stepped up a lot. And Gabriel Miranda has never been able to implement something like that consistently. And that's kind of why he is where he is. I think Morgan wins this one. I'm going to say probably by decision. And that's a relatively simple one. Moving on to what should be a banger fight. Kevin Jusset versus Brian Battle. I'm going with Brian Battle here, even though Kevin Jusset has actually came through for me multiple times. There have been times where he's looked great, both physically and technique-wise, very powerful, very slick. There's also times where he's looked very beatable, slow, sluggish, faded out. You know, he's won both of his fights in the UFC. He has a 10-2 record overall, which is very good, nothing to scoff at. Brian Battle's going to have a small reach advantage coming into this fight. Brian Battle, the much more tenured UFC fighter as well, with 5 wins and 1 loss in the UFC, which is half of his professional career, as his professional career comprises of 10 wins and 2 losses entirely. Brian Battle's the pick here. I think Brian should get it done. Brian's pretty much a savage. I think that the difference between these two fighters is, like what I just said, Brian is a savage. Brian is a lot more ruthless and ferocious. I think he's going to take it and be able to aggressively land on Kevin Jousset. We move on to William Gomis versus Joe Anderson Brito. I fuck with William Gomis, actually, but I fuck with Joe Anderson Brito even more, and I think that Brito will be able to get this one done. William Gomis is a very elusive and hard-to-hit guy, so this one might not actually end in a finish. This actually might go to a decision, for real. I know some people have been saying online Joe Anderson Brito might pick up a submission here. That's very possible. Very possible. But that might never happen. This fight might not go to the ground once. There might be some grappling, but who knows. I'm going with Joe Anderson Brito. I think he'll get this one done by decision, if not by finish. I know that's literally everything that could possibly happen except for a draw, but I think Joe Anderson is the better fighter, the more ruthless fighter, the more dangerous fighter out of these two. And that was the featured fight of the night. Moving on to the co-main event of Nasruddin Imavov versus Brendan Allen. Brendan All-In Allen. The highs and lows of Brendan Allen's career, man, with a very, very impressive UFC record of 12 wins and 2 losses to help fill out his professional record of 25 wins and 5 losses. Brendan Allen is good. We all know Brendan Allen is very good and very skilled. Here's the thing. Brendan Allen has a fucking suspect chin. He has a suspect chin. And I'm scared, man. Nasruddin is a little bit of a sniper. Now, the Roman Dolidze shit was such an abhorrent fight that it really probably tainted a lot of people's idea and opinion of Nasruddin Imavov. Rightfully so. But I think there's more to Nasruddin. I think he's going to want to show out. I'm going to say that Nasruddin gets this one by decision, but there's a chance that he chins Brendan Allen. Now, Brendan Allen is not a fucking schlub. He's not a schmuck. He could win this fight and also kind of do it easily. He could take the back of Nasruddin Imavov, choke him out. I could see that happening, no bullshit. But there's something about Brendan Allen that I really struggle to trust him now. I very much struggle to trust him. I also remember that not too long ago, he got into a fucking brawl with Marvin Vettori at the Hard Rock, at the Seminole Hard Rock in fucking Florida. I hit him dead a couple months ago, and then a couple months before that, they were scrapping in there. I remember hearing, now there's recording of this fight, really not even a fight. There's a recording of Brendan Allen seemingly assaulting Marvin Vettori. Like, just starts going up and fucking punching him. But I do remember as soon as that happened, people had actually said that Marvin Vettori dropped Brendan Allen, right? I remember reading that. People were talking about that. Now it's actually hard to find that. Maybe that never happened, but Marvin Vettori himself said that he got in some good licks before the cameras were rolling. He would probably say that anyways, but honestly, who cares? I just felt like I would bring that up. I'll probably link like an article or something in the description of this video, but it is hard to find the tweets where people were saying he was dropped. But I do remember that vividly. Let me know if you remember that, actually. Let me know. Because a big joke was like, damn, Marvin got a knockdown and it wasn't in the UFC. Like, it was like, the people were joking about it. And I bring that up to say this. If you're getting into fights and getting dropped outside of the UFC, you're not even being fucking paid for it. Like, that is one of the biggest no-nos, biggest red flags you could possibly ever see. I don't think that Nasruddin Imavov is getting into brawls in the street and getting fucking dropped. You know, like, and that might not have happened. The dropping part, that might not have happened. The fight definitely happened. We know that for a fact. But I don't know, man. Nasruddin Imavov is the pick here. I might look stupid with this pick. Brendan Allen might dog walk him, but we're gonna go with Nasruddin. Moving on to the main event, Renato Moicano. Moicano won money. Renato Money Moicano versus Benoit Saint Denis, a.k.a. the God of War. It really fucking pains me, but I'm going to have to go with BSD. I'm going to have to go with Benoit. I don't know if Renato will be able to survive the power shots from Benoit, and I think Benoit is a competent enough grappler to not get taken down immediately and then subbed. Now, Moicano has unbelievable fucking heart and will to survive. Not only survive and win and finish fights, but he's also been fucking finished on some Mortal Kombat shit. Like brutality. Straight up brutality. Like, people have brutalized Renato before. this might be one of those times, unfucking fortunately. I really wish it wasn't the case. I want Renato to win. I'll be rooting for him, but picking him, I don't know. I think that Benoit, simply put, has more opportunities to win. He has more win conditions for this fight, specifically with this matchup. It's looking a little grim for Renato, in my opinion. But we might be wrong. People were saying that about the Jalen Turner shit. It gets spooky. It gets spooky. Again, this should actually be a fire little main event, but it could be over super quick. For both dudes, though. For both dudes. Maybe Renato pulls out a sub from the bottom, gets dropped, pulls out a sub, craziness round one. Holy shit. I don't think so. I really do not think so. I think Benoit, the power shots are going to take effect. We've seen Renato crumble the power shots. We've seen him take hits and drop. Simple as. Benoit is going to be the pick there. I have to pick Benoit. I have to pick Benoit, and if I had to pick him, I'd say by round 1 KO TKO on some spooky shit. On some real spooky shit. That's it for the picks and predictions, man. I do think this card is going to be great. Starting a little early, but I never mind the early cards. I think it's going to start right at the afternoon, right at 12 p.m. on Saturday. So you can expect the Smoky Hours live stream to be up around 11:30, 11:45, maybe even earlier than that if I decide to hop in, maybe talk some shit. Shout out to everyone that's been hopping into the streams and typing and talking. We've been having a great time, man. We've been going crazy. Smash that like button, smash that dislike button if you dislike the video, but let me know why. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on this fight. Let me know your picks, predictions, anything, what you had for lunch. Who gives a fuck? Just let me know. Subscribe if you want to see more content. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, much love. Big kiss. And it is my pleasure to present to you the little sneak peek for a series that I will be calling Spooky Hours, funnily enough. Kind of a horror-themed, an internet horror, internet oddity kind of themed series where I just find something spooky, scary, unnatural, disturbing, supernatural, paranormal, occult, and I talk about it for a little bit. We try to get to the bottom of it. Sometimes we won't be able to get to the bottom of it, but without further ado, it is my pleasure to present to you the introduction to Spooky Hours Episode 1.